Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtodhara Shata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtodhara Shata Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Goshyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Mathura Vrindavana Dhama Ki Jai Navadvip Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai Ganga Mayi Ki Jai Yamuna Mayi Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 9, text number 37, which is short prose, so I'll chant it. Samavishamamati nam matamunusarasi yathā raju khanda sarpadi dhyam. Sama, equal or proper. Vishama, and unequal or mistaken. Matinam, of those having intelligence. Matam, conclusion. Anusarasi, you follow. Yathā, just as. Rajju khandaha, a piece of rope. Sarpa adi, a snake, etc. Dhyam, of those who perceive. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. A rope causes fear for a bewildered person who considers it a snake, but not for a person with proper intelligence who knows it to be only a rope. Similarly, you, as the supersoul in everyone's heart, inspire fear or fearlessness according to one's intelligence, but in you there is no duality. Purport. In Bhagavad-gītā 4:11, the Lord says, yathā prapadyante tāṁs tathaiva bhajāmy aham. As one surrenders unto me, I award him accordingly. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the reservoir of everything, including all knowledge, all truth, and all contradictions. The example cited herein is very appropriate. A rope is one truth, but some mistake it for a snake, whereas others know it to be a rope. Similarly, devotees who know the Supreme Personality of Godhead do not see contradictions in Him, but non-devotees regard Him as the snake-like source of all fear. For example, when Nṛsiṁhadeva appeared, Prahlāda Mahārāja saw the Lord as the supreme solace, whereas his father, a demon, saw him as the ultimate death. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.237, bhayam dvitiya bhiniveshatah syat. Fear results from being absorbed in duality. When one is in knowledge of duality, one knows both fear and bliss. The same Supreme Lord is a source of bliss to devotees and fear to non-devotees who have a poor fund of knowledge. God is one, but people understand the absolute truth from different angles of vision. The unintelligent see contradictions in Him, but sober devotees find no contradictions. Om ajñānatimirandasya jñānāñjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha namashreshtam manamapi shachiputramatra swarupam rupam tasyagrajam burupurim maturim goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pradita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tannatosmi Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamsha Pancha kalpadarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So for any particular subject, whether material or spiritual, there's many ways of understanding it. For example, in the Vedas, I guess there's of the Vedas, there's 6 main interpretations, the Shad Darshans. There's Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, yoga and Vedanta. So there's 6 main views of reality according to the Vedic conception, and each of them there's a different rishi who wrote different sutras that describes that particular view. And they're very different. It's not that they're all like basically along the same lines. They're very different. Different perceptions of reality according to basically the same texts. So according to a person's background, according to their samskars, according to their birth, their upbringing, they have a different view of reality. They view basically according, there's this phrase, Atmavan manyate jagat, that I see the world as I am. So according to our conditioning, we see the world in a particular way. So the example is given here. If somebody's bewildered, they may take a rope, which looks like a snake but isn't, to actually be a snake. And you could kind of elaborate on that further. If somebody's, like, for example, afraid of snakes, they have this consciousness, particular consciousness of snakes. If they see a rope, then they're more likely to assume that it's a snake, because that's just kind of their consciousness. I actually have a personal experience like this. Actually, one time behind my parents' home, my parents' home was like on a hill, and like there's like a valley right there, small little valley. So if you just go down into the valley, at the center of the valley, there's this creek that runs through, and there's kind of like a forest around it. And so one time when I was a little kid, we were at sometimes you can't really like walk along the creek because the foliage is so dense. There's like trees and stuff. It's kind of a dense. It's not like a kind of forest you can just walk through. So we were walking inside the creek, like on rocks, and the walls of the creek sometimes get kind of high. They get like up to here, something like that. So you're walking through, and you're just kind of surrounded by these walls, and then there's big rocks, big boulders, and the creek is kind of flowing in between them. So I was walking through. It was like me, my brother, and one of our friends, and we were walking through, and I was the first. I was first, in the procession, and I saw something. There's like clothes sometimes that are like stuck in the, I don't know, maybe from like homeless people or something like that. So I saw this rope there on this rock. I assume it's like just another piece of clothing or whatever. I saw this rope. So as I'm walking, the rock is like right here, and I get there, and then I kind of look over at the rope, and I see it's actually a snake. It's not a rope, it's actually a snake. So I had the opposite experience here, where I thought a snake was a rope. Anyway, it scared me. I mean, it wasn't super close. It was a rattlesnake, but it wasn't super close to me. It was like maybe here. But so, according to one's perception, according to one's experiences, they experience the world, they see the world in a particular way. And so this applies mostly to material things, but also to how people perceive the Supreme Lord. People, according to their conceptions, they perceive Krishna in a particular way. For example, there's some people are just indifferent. Like this verse, Krishna Buli She Jivanadir Bahirmukh. Krishna Buli, they've just forgotten. And a lot of people are mostly in this category where they've just kind of forgotten. They're not particularly inimical, but I mean, they could go either way. You could say depending on their mood, maybe. But they feel that religion isn't of so much relevance to them, or if it is of any relevance, it's just like there's this Jordan Peterson, for those who know him. He says, religion is very important. Bhakti Jordan. Religion is very important. Why? It's very important for human society. Why? Because there's all these symbols in religion. And from these symbols, we can learn things about how to make our lives better. So basically, it's just kind of like not really religion. But, so there's people who are indifferent. They just don't really care that much. They don't really think about it. most people are kind of in this category. They're just kind of so busy with their own lives that they don't really think about God, or it's not super relevant to them. On the other hand, there's those who are inimical, like Prabhupada's mentioning this purport, Hiranyakashipu. Very inimical. There's this verse in Bhagavad-gītā, Hankaram balam darapam, kamam krodham chasamshrita, mamatma paradeheshu, pradvishanto bhyasuyakaha. That those who have taken shelter due to their false ego, they've taken shelter of their own strength, they've taken shelter of vanity, of lust, and of anger. They've taken shelter of these things, and therefore, although Krishna is present in their body, and Krishna is present in everybody else's bodies, they just blaspheme. That's what they do. They just blaspheme Krishna, and they blaspheme his devotees, they blaspheme his teachings, like that. So Hiranyakashipu, of course, is a great example of this. He was so... he was angry at Lord Vishnu because Vishnu killed his brother, Hiranyaksha, in the form of Varahadev. And so he was so absorbed in his own, you could say, lusty desires. Well, not you could say, he was absorbed in his own lusty desires. So much so that he wanted to kill Lord Vishnu. And when he found out that his son Prahlāda was kind of favorable toward him, or siding with Lord Vishnu, and then he tried to kill his own son, in so many different ways. So yeah, Hiranyakashipu, also Kamsa. Kamsa is a very pertinent example from Shastra, that he was so absorbed in, just trying to stay alive and enjoy whatever opulence he had, that he imprisoned his family members, Vasudeva and Devaki, and then he tried to kill Krishna. He sent so many demons to try to kill Krishna. Also Ravana. Ravana was so absorbed, he was so lusty that he kidnapped Sita Devi, and he stole her away from Lord Ram, and then this whole battle ensued. So there's those who are inimical. There's also like impersonalists too. Impersonalists, you could say, are also. It's a more subtle kind of, what do you say, inimicalness, enmity toward the Supreme Lord. It's a more subtle kind of enmity. There's this verse, Vedanti tattva vidas tattvam yat jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdite. That some people they see these different, there's three different phases of realization of the Supreme Lord. So some people they see this Brahman, the Brahman effulgence, as the topmost realization of the Supreme Lord. And so therefore when people say to them, or when people bring up this, the fact that actually the Supreme Lord does have a form behind like Sri Upanishad says, like behind the effulgence of his transcendental body, there's actually a transcendental body. They become very inimical, and they blaspheme this conception. They say that it's primitive. They say that it's nonsense. That it's anthropomorphizing God. That God's actually, he's inconceivable. So how could he have a form? Because we can anyway. All arguments like that. And of course, ultimately, their philosophy ends with the fact that they're the Supreme Lord. And that's really the root of it, is that they want to be the Supreme Lord. They want to be the supreme enjoyer, the center of everything. So that's why they adopt such philosophies. At one time I was on book distribution in Los Angeles, and we were at Venice Beach, and I held out a book to this guy. I said, "Hey, what's your, here you go, man, this is for you." And I said, "What's your name?" He goes, "My name?" He goes, "I'm the creator." He goes, "I'm the source." He kind of like went into this whole thing. And so anyway, yeah. He didn't take a book, no. He was really puffed up guy. Yeah, that's true, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, there's many people who are inimical to the Lord. Most people in Kali Yuga fall under these two categories, inimical or just completely indifferent, which being indifferent you could say is a kind of enmity toward the Supreme Lord. But then there are those, in Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna says there are those who are pious, chaturveda bhajante mam, janasukrita norjana, artho jigyasura artharti, gyani cha bhartarshava. That there's 4 kinds of pious people, those who are, those who are distressed, those who are desirous of money, those who are inquisitive, and then those who are kind of inquisitive from like a, you could say, scholarly perspective, and then those who are actually genuinely searching for the absolute truth. And of those people, Krishna says, the best are those who are sincerely searching after the absolute truth. Because those who are searching for the absolute truth, they are humble enough to understand that there is an absolute truth, and they're ready, you could say, to put their faith in Krishna when they find him, so to speak. And also, if they come in contact with a devotee, if they get to associate, if they get some sadhu sangha, then they can develop real, actual, mature faith in Krishna and attain the highest goal of life. So it's described in Shastra that there's 2 kinds of faith. There's lokika and shastriya shraddha. So basically, up until now, all these different people who have these different conceptions of the Lord, they have lokika shraddha. It means that they have faith according to their upbringing, according to their traditions, their social customs, basically according to the things that they've experienced in this world. But when one associates with a devotee, then by that devotee's mercy, that particular person can develop shastriya shraddha, which is shraddha, or faith, based on the statements in the revealed scriptures. And so when one associates with one who has shastriya shraddha, then that person can bestow, that the devotee can bestow that same shraddha on that person. So there's this verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. So Jiva Goswami describes that the Bhakti Lata Bij, which is being transmitted by the mercy of Guru and Krishna to the conditioned soul, this is Shastriya Shraddha, which allows one to see the absolute truth as it is. You get the full picture of the absolute truth. Like I mentioned earlier, this verse, Vedanti tat tattva vidas, tattvam yajganam advayam brahmeti paramatmiti bhagavaniti shabdyate. So one who is viewing the Supreme Lord according to their particular conditioning, they don't get the full picture of what the absolute truth is, or who he is. And therefore, like Prabhupada's saying in this purport, and also this verse is saying, they're absorbed in the dualities of fear and bliss. It means they're viewing the Supreme Lord in relation to themselves, and in relation to what he can do for me. So for example, Hiranyakashipu, he's seeing the Lord as ultimate death, because he's viewing the Lord according to himself, because the Lord's about to kill him. He can't see that actually the Lord is his own person, and that actually he's full in and of himself, and that Hiranyakashipu is actually not the center of everything. So those who are Shastra Chakshusha, who see with the eyes of Shastra, they get the full picture of Krishna. Therefore, there's no contradictions. Like Prabhupada saying this purport, when one is in, the unintelligent see contradictions in him, but sober devotees find no contradictions. So there's so many so-called contradictions. Like people are always debating, does God have a form? Does God not have a form? Or the yogis, they say, it's just the Paramatma within the heart. So there's all these different contradictions, like how can God have a form and then also be formless, and then also be in Goloka Vrindavan or wherever, in Vaikuntha, plus spread throughout the entire mature world. All these can be seen as contradictions. But when one sees the full picture of Krishna, when one sees Krishna as he is, then he understands that actually, because Krishna is absolute, then his energies are non-different from him. And so he's spread throughout this material world in the form of his energies and also his expansions. He can expand himself into the hearts of everyone, into all different universes. And the transcendental effulgence coming from his body is his, you could say, formless form. So when one sees all these different things as expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowing him, knowing Krishna to be the source of all those expansions, then there's no contradiction. So like this, all contradictions are resolved in Krishna when one understands him as he is. And when one does understand him as he is, another thing is that they can't help but be absorbed or can't help but try to serve him in love. Because Krishna, there's this verse, I forget exactly where it's from, but Dravida Prabhu quotes it. Denu vrindam anumandamayantam venu geetam amritam visrajantam renu rushita chalalakavantam kenu viksha samayurnamudantam. It's describing a darshan of Krishna that he's very blissfully playing his flute, and the cows are falling behind him, and I don't think it's in the 10th canto. I think it's in one of the Goswami literatures. And the dust that's being raised from the cows walking, it's in his hair. And he's looking very beautiful. And therefore, the author at the end of this verse says, "Who could not be attracted to such a darshan of the Lord?" So Krishna, he's all attractive. That's what his name means. And so when one understands him as he is, if they really understand him as he is, then they can't help but be just completely absorbed in love for him. Therefore, the Vrajvasis, like Mother Yashoda, they can't help it. They're so absorbed in love for him that actually, it's interesting. When you understand God as he is, you love him so much that you forget that he's God. So it's like a different kind of bewilderment. So basically the living entities are like in one of two different kinds of bewilderments. Either they're in the bewilderment of Mahamaya, that they think that God's not real or that he's just some mundane person or something like that, or they've realized who Krishna actually is, but they're so attracted to him, they love him so much that they're bewildered by Yoga Maya, and they just completely forget that he's actually God. And so when one sees the Supreme Lord or understands the Supreme Lord based on the statements of Shastra, not relying on their own strength of intelligence, or not relying on their scholarship or something like that, and they get the mercy of a pure devotee, then they can see the Lord as he is and see him as the supreme lovable object, like Prabhupada says. Because that's who he is. So if one perceives the supreme lovable object, then they can't help but just feel love for him, because that's who he is. He's naturally attractive to everybody. And then one renders devotional service unto him. And when one does this, even in this world, like Rupa Goswami says, Jivan Mukta Sa Uchite, that one can be liberated even in this life from the dualities of fear and bliss, material fear and material bliss, and the miseries of this world. And he's reinstated in his constitutional position, Jivar Shrodapoi Krishna Niti Das, as a servant of Krishna in the spiritual world. So it's a little early, but I guess that's all I really have. So we can have maybe discussion or maybe not, if there's anything. Yes, Axel?
I don't know the verses. Nice class, thank you. In the beginning you mentioned that there's something about like people's views. Something they have their own aspect of reality, and through Shastra. I was kind of trying to wonder, how does this Puranas work like that? Because they're like bona fide in a sense, like Vedic literature of Vyasadeva, but when they read them, each Purana says something different, like Shiva's the supreme or Brahman's the supreme. Yeah. Is that what they're called? The person should read them at their level and just kind of like, how does that work exactly then?
Well, the Vedic literatures are written, they're written for the gradual upliftment of the living entities. So there's different Vedic literatures for different people. So there's the Sattvata Puranas, there's the Rajasic Puranas, and there's the Tamasic Puranas. So for people who are in different modes of material nature, there's different shastras that are prescribed for them. Like, for example, Kama Sutra, which is basically the art of having sex, and all these different scientific, you could say, yeah, basically just how to have sex. Those shastras aren't, you could say prescribed for certain. They're for, people who are attached to that kind of thing. Not for Vaishnavas, yeah. And similarly, the shastras that say that Shiva is the Supreme Lord, or that Durga or Shakti is the Supreme, and that one should surrender unto them. There's so many shastras that say so many things, but they're for uplifting people who are in particular modes of material nature. So, for example, those who are in the mode of ignorance, there's things like, there's all these tantric shastras that are prescribed for them, like, how to offer meat, or they use, anyway, sometimes these tantric things get really kind of freaky. Different, like, anyway, yeah, so many things. If you look into Tantra, which I wouldn't recommend, I don't think you need to. It's really tamasic, the different yagyas that they do, the different pujas that they do, it's really tamasic, like using women's like menstrual blood in puja and stuff like that. So there's people who are just at that level. And similarly, the Dharma Shastras, there's different Dharma Shastras, and within those Dharma Shastras there's it's described different yagyas by which one can kill an animal and then eat the meat, offering it to Kali or whatever. So there's all these different things for people who are in different modes of material nature, who have different levels of consciousness, but not every single shastra is, for example, like Vaishnavas. Kama Sutra is like not really relevant for us. Neither is the Tantric Shastras. They're just not really relevant, because those who are in the mode of goodness, they follow the Sattvata Puranas. And the Sattvata Puranas, the topmost of the Sattvata Puranas, is the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the Srimad Bhagavatam doesn't pay any, it doesn't really give any emphasis to any of these things. So, yeah, in short, different literatures are meant for different kinds of people, and they're meant to, just like if you're on a fishing vessel or something like that, and there's a net, under the water. So the wider the net, the more fish you catch. So similarly, the Lord makes it so that there's a very wide net of shastras that can catch different people and uplift them. So, like that.
Two more maybe, actually.
Okay.
What defines a Purana? Is it like Vyasadeva wrote it, and is the CC considered a Purana, or just how? No,
there's different I think like 10 different subjects that make up a Purana. But so I don't know them by heart, but there's 10 different like subjects that kind of make a particular text a Purana, and generally it involves like history. Like one of them is like histories of like kings and things like that. It talks about like taking shelter with the Supreme Lord, and these are out of order, of course, but there's different, things like that. But the Chaitanya Charitamrita is not considered a Purana necessarily, no.
Is this what, pastimes?
It's just it's a shastra. It's like a Smriti shastra.
Smriti shastra.
Smriti shastra means a shastra. There's Shruti and there's Smriti. Shruti is what's directly spoken by the Supreme Lord and heard. And then Smriti is basically like, you could say, recalled.
Okay.
So the Puranas are considered Smriti because they're recalled.
Okay, thank you. Well, yeah.
You were mentioning different people's like general conceptions throughout your talk. I mean, it wasn't the main point, but the general people's perception of religion. So we could pull up many. You could say not. We could pull up many things from our scriptures that would do really well at an interfaith meeting. But we could also pull up many things from our scriptures, but means Bhagavad-gītā, Srila Prabhupada's books, that wouldn't do well at a interfaith meeting. Also statements that Prabhupada made, like in terms of his conversations, also. So one statement that I heard recently, which I haven't heard before actually, devotees should read Prabhupada's letters also. He wrote 7,000 letters. Tirthamaj, he told me some years ago that he was reading Prabhupada's letters like every night. He would read a few letters for Prabhupada and then this way make his way through them, you know. Anyway, so in one of the letters Srila Prabhupada wrote to Mahatma Prabhu, everybody knows Mahatma, right? Mahatma Prabhu, who was based here in San Diego and who was preaching here with Bhakti Dasa and others. Prabhupada wrote him this, what he said was, and this wouldn't go well at interfaith meeting, but Prabhupada said, yeah, if you preach vigorously for the next 25 years, all of these other religions will disappear.
Wow.
Now
That's awesome.
Now I was reading something with Mahatma Prabhu, you know, because you could see statements in different ways, obviously. Now, how people perceive that can be different, you know, how you look at that. So Mahatma Prabhu was saying, I mean, I didn't really like fully get into what he was, but briefly what he was saying was, he was saying, well, we see that these religions haven't disappeared, and that should say something about our preaching. Have we been vigorously preaching, you know? Now, did Prabhupada mean in San Diego, throughout the world, you know, what? But in another, so anyways, how would you see this statement of Prabhupada? If someone was to ask you, like me, or like anybody, like let's say somebody, now, you could say forgetting about other traditions and trying to make it an interfaith, you know, peace and love type of meeting. If someone was to ask you, like, how are we supposed to understand this? Like, we want other religions to disappear, or have we not preached vigorously and therefore religions they haven't disappeared, or have they actually disappeared in terms of their influence? Because some people say, okay, they're preaching, but okay, who are they getting, and what's the quality of, you know, what's the quality of the people, or you know, is it really like making an impact in the world? Or, you know, so there's different ways to see it. So what would you say about that?
Well, I guess, I mean, it's not that we like want other religions to disappear because we like hate them, or like they're like infidels or whatever. But I think Prabhupada's saying that, well, you know, Prabhupada would often say that, well, anyway. For example, the Christian religion, or that's what we're talking about. Yeah, or the yeah. It's a pure religion, but Prabhupada would, you know, mention how Jesus Christ, he was preaching to a particular lower class people. So therefore, the religion itself, you could say, is a lower class religion in the sense that not everything is there. There's some things which are adjusted according to time, place, and circumstance. So I think what Prabhupada is saying there, that is, if we preach vigorously, then we can eradicate people's misconceptions, and there won't be a need for, you could say, lower religions, that everybody can be, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, everybody can be, you could say, converted to the highest form of religion, which is Krishna consciousness, Bhagavad Dharma. Now, in terms of understanding, like, the practical kind of, like, why hasn't that happened? I mean, I think you could say maybe there's an argument that we haven't preached vigorously. You could say maybe in like the 80s or something like that, there was like a lot of stuff that happened and devotees stopped distributing books for the most part. So you could say, maybe you could see it like that. I'm not saying that's the all in all, but I think there's different ways to see it.
A lot of churches are closing.
Yeah, also...
Actually, thousands of churches closing. No, we could look it up, but there's like, I was looking into it, there's like, in one particular Christian denomination, there's literally like thousands of churches closing, which in America, which is amazing. And I mean, someone says, "Oh, is that the success of the Hare Krishna movement?" That's what you guys are saying? That, oh, the churches are closing? Is that your guys' success? I don't know, the statement here, right? Anyways.
I bet it is.
But it's interesting because if you think about it, like, why would a church close? It means, okay, let's say they got a room that could fit 250 people. At one point it was going, 250 people were showing up, families and children and everything, right? Then over time, just kind of like dwindles, and then you have, and then the person's like, okay, people aren't giving their tithings, and should we really keep this open? And it's a big debate in people's mind, and they say, all right, let's just sell it and close it. But anyways, it's interesting. You see that more and more in America. But therefore, I think the devotees need to get more serious about preaching, because you can't just say, oh, well, the churches are closing, okay, and whatever devotees want to think about that.
Yeah.
All right, but you have to get more serious about preaching, because that means a lot of people aren't identifying with Christianity, identifying as spiritual people, but they need an alternative.
You need to catch them.
Yeah. And you can't just let them be swallowed by other, what we would say, nirvishesha shunyavadi type of groups, or just out and out hedonism, and they say they're spiritual and they just have some vague belief of whatever. So anyways, it's an interesting time.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like that years ago, thousands of churches closing. I mean, that's like unheard of in American history. There's churches, it was like a buildup of expansion. Now it's like,
Maybe it's part of it also that they're just having these big mega churches, and therefore a lot are closing, but not necessarily an indicator of how many few are. There are a lot more and more of these, like.
Yeah, there's mega churches. That's true, but
they close 20 small churches for one big mega church.
Yeah, but this is mostly happening in like small towns or like on the East Coast, southern, these places. There's like a lot just closing left and right, and it's not like there's a huge, mega church like built there. Yeah, and aside from that, there's all these statistics that are saying people are just not identifying with Christianity anymore. Like they won't say, "Oh, I'm Christian." They'll say, "Oh, I'm spiritual," which means that if they're not identifying as Christians, then practically means why would they be going to church? It means they may have some issue with it or whatever. They say, "Oh, I'm spiritual" or something. So, But even if you calculated, thousands of churches just, dropping off all over the country, I mean, how many mega churches would you? I mean, I guess in a mega church you could fit a lot of people, but still, if it's that kind of spread out different places, as far as I understand, it wasn't like mega churches were, so.
So, do you have any comments on like organized religion itself, like going down? That might be one of the factors. Like if
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Balaram Prabhu was saying. That organized religion in general, people are kind of burnt out, particularly mostly because of Christians, in the way you could say Christians preach, and also I think Christian philosophy or the way it was presented to them, maybe as kids or something like that, I think people have an issue with. But I think mostly it's just the way that Christianity has conducted its preaching. In the West, I think people have gotten kind of burnt out, and they kind of lump in all organized religion as, we could say, following or subscribing to that same kind of thing. So, yeah, definitely people are losing faith in organized religion, and so, yeah. Therefore, when devotees preach, often they don't mention, or they don't say, "Hey, come join our religious organization." They just say, "Come chant and come,"
A quick comment. Could it be that what they call the gratification is becoming a lot more like amped up, you could say, just like more intense? That, following religion, it seems to be a bit, not as interesting or harder because...
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Because, they could be sincere, but they also have no desire, so they just go out.
Also, one particular aspect of culture, I'd say Western culture mostly, is that there's this big emphasis that nobody should ever feel guilty about anything. Don't ever feel guilty. Don't ever feel uncomfortable. You're perfect just the way you are. Don't beat yourself up. So it's like this big. So like.
Well, this is popular within the last 10 years.
Yeah, like 5 minutes ago, basically, it started that everybody. Yeah, all of a sudden you can't say anything, you can't do anything, you can't, that might make somebody feel guilty about something like. Yeah, so if you tell somebody like, okay, give up illicit sex or give up intoxication, you could say, it's like, well, if you can't, like, if you need to, like, yeah, if you need to have, like, just don't beat yourself up, like, oh, it's fine, it's like, you're like, don't. Anyway, basically, like, you can't feel bad about anything. Nothing's wrong with you. That's the main thing. It's like, yeah, you're perfect just the way you are. You're beautiful. You're not. No, but yeah. So I think that's difficult for many people because they see religion as saying like, oh, yeah, you're sinful. You're.
And aside from being sinful, in Christianity, they say you're sinful and you can never stop being sinful.
Yeah.
You're always a sinful just wreck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't surrender, you're going to go to hell. Yeah, that's there. But it's interesting because they practically say you can never be a saint.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, well.
Anyway, there was this video. There's this video. That Christian preacher. I think I showed you Balaram Prabhu one time. That Australian guy. Oh, I showed Mukunda. But anyway, this Australian, he actually met Brigupati Prabhu recently, I think in L.A. And there's a video of their interaction, and yeah. So anyway, basically, but yeah, he was kind of saying that like, he was like, Jeff. So have you ever looked at a woman with lust? Have you ever? Yeah, the same thing. But anyway, have you ever this thing or that thing, that, and then at the end, so what you just told me is that you're a lying, cheating, woman, mongering murderer. And the Bible says, and so it's like really intense. And then basically saying like, and you're jumping out of a plane, and instead of pulling the parachute, which is Jesus, you're just trying to flap your arms and trying to fly on your own, basically saying like, you think you can save yourself, or so anyway. But yeah, that they yeah, I'll show you. But Brigapati were actually kind of, Brigapati was like amazing. He did a really amazing job speaking to him. And actually in the video, the guy kind of does an aside for a second. He's like, I did kind of make a mistake here. I should have, he actually, Brigapati kind of smashed him, to be honest with you. And even in the video, he kind of acknowledges it. Okay, anyway, sorry. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. I haven't showed it to him, no. No, it's a couple of days ago. Maybe like a week ago now. I guess, yeah, he was distributing books and he met him. Yeah.